My wife had a long affair with my friend. I caught them red-handed and exposed them by printing their secret messages. So my wife, 26 years old, let's call her Mia, cheated on me, a 27-year-old, with my friend, also 27 years old, whom we'll call Jack for convenience. Here's a little backstory. We met when I was 22 years old at the wedding of a mutual friend. Mia was a good friend of the bride, and I was a friend of the groom. We were seated at the same table to get to know each other. When I first saw her, I was struck by her beauty. As we started talking, we realized we had a lot in common and instantly hit it off. We talked at the table for a long time, and then went to the dance floor. We danced and drank all night, eventually kissing right there on the dance floor. When we pulled apart, our friends, the groom and bride, approached us and asked what was happening between us. They were delighted, playing the role of matchmakers. We brushed it off, exchanged numbers, and left it at that. About a week later, I received a message from her asking to meet up. It turned out the bride had given her my number. Of course, I agreed, and this turned into a relationship. Our relationship was wonderful, with minor quarrels but never any serious fights. About 2 years later, I proposed to her, and less than a year after that, we got married. We had been married for just over a year when everything started to fall apart. Shortly before our first anniversary, little things began to bother me. Mia became more secretive with her phone. Girls' nights out became more frequent, and our sex life dwindled to almost nothing. I brought this up several times, but she always dismissed it. I grew colder and colder. I stopped kissing her goodbye when leaving for work, and unless there were important topics to discuss, we barely talked. One night, while Mia was asleep, I took her phone and laptop to check her messages, emails, and chats, but I found nothing. After reading stories online about infidelity, I decided to check her car. I took her keys and found a second phone in the car. I immediately understood what was happening, but wanted to gather all the evidence before confronting her. I didn't want her to say, "It was just one time," or come up with some other excuse. I looked through the phone and saw that there was only one contact saved. I read all the messages, connected the phone to my computer, and printed every message and photo. I spent the night researching divorce lawyers. I spent hours choosing one and finally found one I liked. I emailed him, but it was Saturday, so his office was closed. Next, I wanted to find out who her lover was. I took my phone, entered the number, and was about to call, pretending to be from Spectrum Internet Services, because who doesn't use their services? Instead, Jack's contact name popped up. It took me a minute to piece it together, but when I realized, I exploded. I was yelling and cursing in my office. My wife opened the door to check what was going on, but seeing me, I told her to get the hell out. She closed the door and went back to our bedroom. I had never yelled at my wife before or even raised my voice. I spent the entire day in my office, silently seething with rage, just staring at the wall. I called one of my friends, the groom from the wedding where Mia and I had met, and told him I needed a drink. I asked if he could join me. He must have sensed something in my voice because he asked if I was okay. I told him no, and that I really needed a drink. Without saying a word, I grabbed all the printouts and headed to the bar. I arrived first, ordered 4 shots and a beer. I was finishing the last shot when my friend, let's call him Ted, arrived. He asked what was going on. I told him straight out, "Mia is cheating on me." He expressed sympathy and asked if I wanted to know with whom. I told him it was Jack. Ted became visibly upset because he was the one who had introduced me to Jack. All he could say was, "I'm sorry," over and over again. Jack and I were never particularly close. We didn't invite each other out to hang out, but when we ran into each other at parties, we were friendly. I told Ted not to tell anyone about this since I had just found out myself and hadn't talked to Mia or the lawyer yet. I asked him not to tell his wife, and if she asked what was wrong with me, he should say I was having work problems. He agreed. We drank and talked almost all night. Then I called a cab and went home around 3 a.m. That was the first time I looked at my phone since making the call. There was a missed call and a bunch of messages, all from Mia. She was asking where I was, when I would be home, and if I was okay. When I came home, she was asleep on the couch. I simply went upstairs to our bedroom and went to sleep. In the morning, I woke up, and she was already in bed. I got dressed, left the house, got into my car, and drove to the office, where I buried myself in work all day. I came back home around 10 p.m., and to my surprise, my wife greeted me. She said she had made dinner and asked if she should heat it up. I told her no and went straight to bed. Shortly after, she followed me, asking what was wrong with me. I told her to leave me alone because I wanted to sleep. She kept pestering me, and eventually I snapped and yelled, "Enough! I'm trying to sleep. Go away!" The next morning, I received an email from the lawyer asking to meet later that day. I confirmed the meeting and started getting ready for work. When I went downstairs, Mia had prepared breakfast and was again trying to talk. I served myself a small portion and sat down. She started by saying I had been acting differently and continued by talking about how I had changed and that she wanted to know why. I told her work had been stressful and that everything would soon be fine. I finished eating, said it was time to leave, and went to the office, counting the minutes until the meeting with the lawyer. Before leaving, I told my assistant I was going out for lunch with a client because Mia sometimes called me at work. The meeting with the lawyer went well. I handed over all the evidence I had gathered, and the lawyer said, "I'm sorry this is happening, but it's good that you've collected this information." He explained that we live in a fault-based divorce state, so Mia wouldn't be entitled to a large share of my money. I told him I hadn't even thought about that. I just wanted the divorce to happen as quickly as possible. He asked me to leave the evidence with him, but I preferred that he make copies since I hadn't yet told Mia that I knew about her affair and didn't want to hear her excuses. He agreed and instructed his assistant to make copies. I asked when she would be served the divorce papers, and he said it would take about 2 weeks. I thanked him and left. I went home to talk to Mia, but when I arrived, she wasn't there. I called her, but she didn't answer. I called again, but still no response. Then I sent her a message. "I don't care if you're fooling around with Jack right now. Come home. We need to talk." As if on cue, she called me back less than a minute later, asking what I was talking about. All I said was, "Come home. Now!" She arrived about 15 minutes later, and I said, "Wow, 15 minutes. That's about the same distance as Jack's house, isn't it?" She looked at me, stunned. I gave her a minute to gather her thoughts, but she just stood there, staring at me. Then I asked, "Well, nothing to say?" She tried to deny everything and confuse me. I let her go on, and she worked herself up, eventually starting to insult me. That's when I slammed my fist on the table to make her stop and pulled out the evidence. At first, I held it up and said, "Look at this mountain of proof I've gathered against you." Then I began showing her each printout, one by one. She started crying and begging me to stop. She tried to apologize, saying she loved me. I said, "Oh, darling, where was all this energy a minute ago? You were so confident, insulting and belittling me." She tried to hug me, saying how sorry she was, but I held up my hand and said, "Don't touch me." She offered to go to the bedroom and do whatever I wanted. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "Honey, I will never touch you again. Do you want to know who else has these photos and messages? My lawyer. I'm filing for divorce. Now take a bag, pack your things, and get the hell out of my house." That was 3 days ago, and I haven't heard from her since. I'm curious, those of you who've been through something similar, what should I expect next? Update 1. After publishing the first part, I received a lot of advice, and I followed most of it. This morning, I decided to tidy up my life a bit. I scheduled a doctor's appointment for 2 days from now to get tested for STDs. Then I started informing the people close to me, my father, and a few friends. They were all supportive, offering advice and asking if I needed help. Since I've got everything under control, I declined. Next, I contacted Mia's parents. I sent them a message thanking them for welcoming me into their family and expressing my gratitude for everything they'd done for me. I explained that Mia and I were divorcing and said I would miss them. That part isn't entirely true. While her parents are nice, they're quite annoying, so I'm glad I won't have to deal with them anymore. I added that if they had questions, they could feel free to ask. They didn't respond for a long time, so I moved on to Mia's sister. This was difficult because we had been good friends, and I knew this situation would ruin our relationship. I wrote to her, "I'm sorry to say this, but Mia and I are getting a divorce, and I wanted you to know. Thank you for accepting me as a brother from the very first day. If you ever need anything, I'll be there for you." Around the same time, I sent this message, and Mia's parents responded. Here's how our conversation went. Parents, we're so sorry to hear this. What happened? Why didn't Mia tell us anything? Mia has been cheating on me for at least a year. I think it started even before our wedding. I don't know why she didn't tell you. I thought she might have gone to your place since she left home. Parents, no, we haven't heard from her. We'll call her. Thank you for telling us. Are you sure she had an affair? Me, absolutely sure. I found their messages. Parents, we're so sorry she did this. We'll try to contact her. After talking to her family, I reached out to Jack's fiancée. I don't remember if I mentioned this earlier, but Jack is engaged. I thought this would be difficult, that Mia and Jack had come up with some master plan. Either Mia didn't tell him I found out, or they're just idiots. I messaged her around 2 p.m., asking if we could meet for coffee. By 2:05, she agreed and suggested a hipster cafe near her workplace at 2:30. I arrived first, ordered coffee, and waited. She showed up a few minutes later, ordered a drink, and sat down. I told her, "There's no easy way to say this, so I'll just say it. Jack has been cheating on you with my wife. It's been going on for over a year." She was, of course, shocked. I then explained that I had only found out a few days ago, and that I needed time to start the divorce process and deal with my own pity before telling her. She asked how I found out, so I told her everything. I offered to show her the evidence and handed her the folder. She flipped through the messages and photos, silently crying. I told her she could keep the folder for talking to Jack or any other purpose. She thanked me, took the folder, and left, looking very defeated. I know many of you advised me to stay sober, keep my cool, and all that, but the weight of everything just came crashing down on me. I decided to spend the week in my backyard, drinking, smoking cigarettes, and blasting loud music. After this week, I plan to stop wallowing in self-pity and get back to my normal routine. On a more positive note, I've already packed most of Mia's things, clothes, jewelry, and so on. I also put our wedding album and all photos with her in boxes. When she comes to collect her belongings, I don't want her staying any longer than necessary. And before you ask, no, I didn't ruin her clothes. Aside from a few photo frames, nothing is broken. At this point, there's not much else to do. I've informed everyone who needed to know, my doctor's appointment is scheduled, my lawyer is hard at work, and 90% of the cheater's belongings are packed in boxes. I honestly don't know what else I should be doing. If she doesn't cause any trouble, this might become the smoothest divorce in history. Thanks for reading, and any advice is welcome. Second update. Since the last update, I've been indulging in self-pity, singing and more singing. I think this is my first time truly processing everything. After posting the update, I passed out in my backyard, surrounded by bottles and a few beer cans. I woke up to the smell of breakfast cooking. My first thought was, oh no, Mia's back and thinks breakfast will fix everything. I was furious, got up from my chair, ready to start yelling, but to my surprise, it was Mia's sister, Emma. I stood there for a minute, trying to calm down. When Emma saw I was awake, she ran to me, hugged me, and led me to the table, placing a plate in front of me. While I ate, she told me how sorry she was. She said that when Mia came to her house, she only mentioned we were having problems, and that everything would be fine in a few days. Then Emma added that when I messaged her about the divorce, she asked Mia, if everything will be fine, why is he divorcing you? Apparently, Mia couldn't take it anymore and told Emma everything. I smirked and said there's no way Mia told her the whole truth. Then I started explaining to Emma what really happened. Emma said that Mia claimed it was a one-time mistake and that I was blowing everything out of proportion. I told Emma I had no intention of reconciling with Mia, and if she was here to convince me otherwise, she was wasting her time. If she was in touch with Mia, I asked her to tell her to find a lawyer. Emma laughed and said she wasn't here for her sister, she was here for me. She said she'd support her sister, but that we were friends too, and she wouldn't abandon me, especially since I hadn't done anything wrong. I stood up, walked to her side of the table, and just hugged her. I'd been so worried this mess would ruin our friendship, and hearing those words from her was a huge relief. Emma stayed with me for 2 days in the guest bedroom and then left. This morning, as I was preparing to head to my cabin, I bought it before the marriage, so Mia can't claim it. I was packing my hunting and fishing gear. Emma asked if she could come along. I told her that as much as I would love her company, it was probably better for her to visit her sister. She agreed, hugged me, and left. I am genuinely grateful for Emma's support. And before anyone says she might be in love with me, let me clarify. She's only 20, and she's far too young for me. This is purely a strong friendship. Almost forgot to mention, I went to the doctor, took the tests, and will have the results on Monday. I've also been checking in with Jack's fiancée a few times to see how she's doing. She said she's okay but doesn't know what to do. I told her that if she wanted to meet next week to talk, I'd be happy to listen. Thank you all so much for your support. You've been a true light in a very dark time in my life. Third update. In my last post, I shared how Emma came to my house and stayed for a few days. She left when I was preparing for my hunting trip to the cabin. Good news, I shot a deer. A beautiful, fat one on the very first day, which I was thrilled about because it left me time for fishing. I caught only 2 fish, but they were decent sized. I cooked one for dinner and froze the other. The rest of my time at the cabin was spent processing the deer and enjoying nature. Other than a couple of drinks a day, I kept the trip alcohol-free, as I promised myself last week. Now for the latest updates. My doctor called, and the results are all clear. This wasn't much of a surprise since Mia and I hadn't been particularly close for months, but it's still good to be certain. I contacted Jack's fiancée, but I didn't hear back for a while. Eventually, she wrote that she's staying with her family. She didn't go into detail, but the fact that she's with them suggests things aren't going well for her. At least she's safe and getting the support she needs. I told her that if there's anything I can do to help, she just has to let me know. She suggested meeting for coffee the next day, and I gladly agreed. We met at the same hipster cafe and talked for about 2 hours. We discussed everything that had happened between me and Mia. She wanted to know what steps I was taking and if reconciliation was on the table. I told her that, in my opinion, once someone cheats, it's over. The level of selfishness and disrespect required to cheat, especially for a year, shows they clearly didn't care about me. I asked her about her plan. She said she was confused, that everything she thought was true had turned out to be a lie. She wasn't sure if she should move on or forgive Jack. I told her that if she could forgive someone for cheating on her for such a long time, she was better than me. She said her entire family was pressuring her to forgive Jack and marry him. I told her I'd be honest. Just because your family wants something doesn't mean you have to agree to it. Then I added, it's obvious Jack doesn't value marriage or what it stands for. He cheated on you, his fiancée, with my wife. If that doesn't show he's unfit for marriage, I don't know what does. I told her to do what she felt was right, and not let anyone else make life-altering decisions for her. I shared that when I first found out, my only thought was to find a way to let my heart trick my mind into forgiving Mia. But I just couldn't do it. I also mentioned that I only talked to one person about it, but my decision was already made, and nothing could have changed it. I added that when she went to her family, she probably already knew what she wanted to do, but let too many voices into her head, all offering their opinions. I ended by saying, all you need to do is trust your gut, because your mind and heart will always try to deceive you. Shortly after that, she thanked me, and we went our separate ways. The next day, I received a message from my lawyer confirming that Mia had been served the divorce papers at work. I thanked him for all his hard work, especially for doing everything so quickly. Soon after, Emma called me and said that Mia hadn't left her room all day and was sitting in bed, crying. I told Emma that Mia had been served the divorce papers, and it was probably starting to sink in just how badly she had messed things up. Emma asked how my trip to the cabin went, and if I caught or hunted anything. I told her all about what I did and how I spent my time. After the call, I mentally prepared myself and tidied up the house, expecting that Mia might come and cause a scene. I figured if she were going to do something, now that she had the papers, it would happen soon. I told my friend, and he agreed to come over as a witness in case anything went wrong. Right now, as I write this, I'm waiting for the Mia hurricane to hit my house. If or when it happens, I'll post the next update. Thank you all for reading. Fourth update. I had no real reason to believe Mia would do something drastic, but given everything that had happened, I realized I never truly knew this woman. I checked all the cameras I had installed around the house, both inside and outside, to ensure they were functioning properly. I called my friend and told him that Mia had been served divorce papers today and that if she showed up, he needed to come over as soon as possible. I wasn't about to end up in jail because of her. It turned out I was right. Mia showed up at my house, banging on the door and yelling for me to let her in. I immediately called my friend and Emma, asking them to come over because Mia was practically losing it, cursing my name, begging to be let in, and calling me every insult she could think of. She even asked how I could be so heartless. Honestly, she wasn't far off. I spent the entire time she was yelling and banging on the door laughing to myself, thinking, why doesn't she just come in? She still has the keys, at least as far as I know. When my friend arrived, Mia was still screaming and banging. He started recording her on his phone, but stayed in his truck. Unfortunately, this idiot brought his wife, who also happens to be a friend of Mia's. She got out and tried to calm Mia down. She approached Mia, hugged her, and tried to talk to her. In response, Mia slapped her across the face and yelled at her to stay out of it. This prompted my friend, who now had it all on video, to call the police. Mia kept yelling and cursing until the police arrived. When they got there, she immediately tried to play the victim. One of the officers approached her, and she started crying, telling them I had hit her and thrown her out of the house. My friend and his wife told the other officer that when they arrived, Mia was already screaming and banging on the door, so they couldn't confirm anything Mia was claiming. After speaking with my friend and his wife, one of the officers came to my door. When I opened it, Mia screamed, "That's him! He hit me!" I want him arrested. The officer started to cuff me, but I said, I can prove she's lying. I just need my phone. He paused and asked me to show the footage from my cameras. After watching the video, he apologized for jumping to conclusions and assuming I was guilty. I told him I didn't blame him. However, he also mentioned they had received 15 calls from my neighbors, and it turned out Mia had been screaming, "He hit me!" during her meltdown. That's why the officers initially assumed I was at fault. After spending about half an hour dealing with the police, they finally cuffed Mia and charged her with disturbing the peace, public intoxication, and driving under the influence. As they were putting her in the squad car, Emma arrived and asked me what had happened. I showed her the video on my phone. One of the officers came over to give me the case number and other documentation. Emma started asking questions about the charges, so I simply went back into the house. She followed me in shortly after and sat down next to me. Emma explained that she had only left the house for 10 minutes to go to the store. When she returned, Mia was no longer in the living room, so she assumed Mia had just gone to bed after drinking too much wine. We talked for a little while longer, and she asked if she could stay the night. I told her she was always welcome. She also mentioned that Mia would have to spend the night in jail. For some reason, she couldn't be bailed out until morning. Emma said she had called her parents to inform them of what had happened and to ask if they could post bail for Mia since Emma didn't have that kind of money. We each had a beer and soon went to bed. The next morning, when I woke up, Emma was already gone. She had left to meet with her parents. I haven't heard from Mia, Emma, or their parents since then, but I imagine their conversation wasn't a pleasant one. Fifth update. I haven't heard anything from Mia since that night, but my lawyer received a message from her attorney notifying us that they would be representing her. Finally, we can officially begin the divorce process. I also checked in with Jack's fiancée to see if she had any updates. We exchanged texts, and she told me she had kicked him out of her house. She had asked her father and brother to pack up all his things and take them to his place. She said her father and brother wanted to beat him up, but she asked them not to, as she just wanted to put everything behind her and move on. She thanked me for checking in on her, and said her close friends were also supporting her. On Friday, right after work, I went home, planning to spend the weekend at my cabin. When I arrived, Emma was already in my driveway. She wanted to collect her sister's belongings, and had brought a list of items Mia expected to get. I went over the list, and everything except one item was already packed in boxes and stored in the garage. I told her I wasn't going to transport or touch anything further. I wasn't taking on any more responsibility. When Mia mentioned the possibility of me damaging her belongings, I offered to cover the cost of a moving company to pack and transport all her stuff, as I didn't want to deal with it myself. I made it clear that I was heading to my cabin and wouldn't be dealing with this mess anymore. Emma thought this was a great idea, wished me a good trip, and took a box of Mia's clothes to load into her car. Then she turned to me and asked if she could join me at the cabin this time. I told her, "Sure, why not go home, drop off the box, and pack a bag for yourself? I'll swing by the store and get supplies in the meantime." By the time I finished shopping and loaded up my truck, Emma was back, ready to go. I locked up the house, and we drove to the cabin together. The weekend went perfectly. The cabin, as I'd realized during my last visit, is a treasure. It's a place of stunning views, complete seclusion, and the freedom to truly breathe and relax. No people, no drama. It's exactly what I needed. By Monday, I called a moving company, and by Tuesday, 3 guys with a big truck arrived to load Mia's belongings. I inspected every box, filmed them being sealed and loaded, and took photos of all the furniture. I documented the entire process to ensure there could be no false claims. I even tipped the movers $50 each for their patience. Afterward, I sent all the footage and photos to my lawyer. The house now feels empty, but also clean without her things. My lawyer advised me not to get rid of anything that could be considered joint property, so most of the furniture went into storage. Since Mia left, I've been sleeping in the guest room. I have no intention of keeping this house, even if it ends up being mine after the divorce. There are just too many bad memories attached to it. Sixth update. It's been quite a while since my last post. I coach a school baseball team, so between finalizing the divorce, dealing with my soon-to-be ex-wife, and training the boys, I've had little free time. A lot has happened since then, so this post might be long. Please bear with me. A few days after the movers delivered Mia's belongings, my lawyer received documents claiming I had damaged her property. She was demanding $1,500 in compensation or threatening to sue me. My lawyer sent her attorney all the videos and photos asking, "In which box are the alleged damaged items?" He reassured me that this claim would only make her look unbalanced in court. While it's a headache now, it would serve as solid evidence later. I suspect her lawyer didn't expect me to be so meticulous in documenting everything. When I discovered Mia's infidelity, I started reading horror stories about how ex-spouses behaved, and I vowed not to become one of those stories. I prepared for almost every outcome and accusation she could throw at me. Now, I don't rule anything out. Mia calls me about once every 2 days, but I never answer. If she leaves a voicemail, I don't listen to it. I just forward it to my lawyer. Every time I send something to him, he says, "You're a dream client. You listen to everything I say, you've gathered mountains of evidence, and I've never had a client so well prepared." His words never fail to make me smile. Validation that I'm handling things right is a small comfort in all this chaos. 2 or 3 weeks ago, my lawyer told me we had enough evidence to bury her in court. Even so, he suggested attempting to settle the matter out of court to appear reasonable. We scheduled a meeting for last week at his office. Beforehand, he reminded me not to say anything to Mia or react to her. "Everything we do will be recorded and could be read by a judge if it goes to court," he said. We arrived early in the morning. To my surprise, Mia was already there with her lawyer. The attorneys greeted each other while Mia and I sat in silence, waiting. Mia's lawyer started by asking what we were willing to offer. My lawyer smirked and said, "With a mountain of evidence against her, infidelity, inappropriate behavior, the only thing we're willing to offer is half the proceeds from the sale of the house and half the savings account. That's more than any judge would award her. Essentially, she leaves the marriage with what she brought into it." He then turned to Mia and said, "If you choose to go to court, I will present every message, force you to read them aloud, display every photo in open court, and have you describe in detail what's happening in each one. I'll also mention your recent charge and show the video." Mia started crying, looked at me, and asked if there was any way to fix things. I said, "You cheated on me before we were even married. The evidence only proves a few weeks before the wedding, but I suspect it went on much longer. There's nothing you can do to make me forget or forgive what you've done. Sign the papers. This is more than you deserve, and I want to end this farce you've created." She cried for about 15 minutes before excusing herself to the restroom. When she returned, still in tears, she signed the papers. Shortly afterward, the meeting ended. In about a month, everything will be finalized. All that's left is to sell the house. I don't think anything else could happen, but if it does, I'll update you. This is likely my final post. Let me know your thoughts on this story. One thing will always baffle me. Why marry someone if you're already sleeping with someone else? Thanks for sticking with me. Take care.